Hello.
Hello. Welcome to the second Sex Matters webinar. I'm here with Jo Phoenix, Professor of Criminology at the Open University, and one of the founders of the Gender Critical Research Network. And she's launched her crowdfunder for her employment tribunal yesterday. Yesterday, was it?
Sunday morning.
Sunday, yes.
Two days.
2 days ago. I've been there. And the Order of the Phoenix, or Phoenix Rising, or
yeah, I think it's just the Order of the Phoenix or Phoenix Rising hashtag.
Yes.
I think there was even an I stand with Jo Phoenix, but
it's brilliant. You asked me advice on being a claimant, and one bit of advice I didn't give you is have a really good name. In the end, all that's left is your name, and you've got a good one. Is it real?
No. No, I'm serious. It's not real. I was born Joanna Healy, and when I was in my early 20s, I decided I didn't want the name Healy anymore, and nor did I want to be called Joanna. So I renamed myself by deed poll. It's all official, to Jo Phoenix.
Right. So you identify as Jo Phoenix.
I do, yes, and as a Phoenix.
Excellent. I first became aware of you, I think, when you did the Women's Place UK lecture about women in prisons and the conflict of rights between trans women and women in prisons. But I'm guessing, like everyone, you probably had some kind of journey going up to that. Do you want to sort of tell your story, starting wherever you want to start it?
Okay. Yeah. I think actually I don't even know where to start it, and that's not a joke. I don't know where to start it. I was a very political feminist, radical lesbian feminist, even vaguely separatist for a little while in the 1980s. I grew up around the anti-porn campaigns. I grew up around Greenham. That was the kind of political background while I was doing a sociology degree. But when I started doing my PhD, I was looking at sex working women or prostituted women or women in the prostitution, whichever terms people want to use. I interviewed quite a few women who were street workers or street prostituted, who had multiple health and welfare problems. And I mean, it was just, they had very, very difficult lives punctuated by poverty and abuse, basically. And that kind of took me on a more academic than activist route, because I realized at the time that all of the theories that we had around everything were far too simplistic. And they were, forgive me for using this word deeply ironically, they were rather binary. So women were either, wholly victimized, or they were workers. And so that started, that's 25 years ago, a very long time, but it got me doing a whole stream of work around sex, gender, sexualities, and sexual violence, and policy reform, trying to figure out ways in which when we go down those either or analyses, it ends up actually harming the very constituency of people that we're trying to protect. So my whole life has been about complexity and nuance, if you like. Somewhere in 2019, just before that talk, Kathleen Stock contacted me to ask me if I would sign a letter to, I think it was a Sunday Times or The Guardian.
I remember that one.
Yeah, that letter. In fact, it was those two letters. I signed both of those. And I was very happy to put my signature to that, because earlier in 2019, my university, the Open University, was scheduled to host a conference with the Center for Crime and Justice Studies. And that conference was cancelled at the last minute, largely because a group of protesters were threatening to protest the conference because Richard Garside was going to speak. Now, that was kicked off because Richard had tweeted Happy Human Female Day on International Women's Day. So he became, temporarily for a short period of time, Britain's #1 transphobe. And so my own colleagues in the university basically decided that rather than run the gamut of being accused of transphobia or have the issue of the protests, that they would simply cancel the conference. Now, as it happens, 2 and a bit years later, and the Rheindorf review later, I actually think they acted unlawfully in doing that. But, who's counting?
Yeah.
So, I am, is the answer to that question. Anyway, so yeah, I signed those. That happened. I signed those letters because that's where I could see Stonewall's influence directly in my own day-to-day life. And then after that, WP UK got in contact with me and asked if I'd do this talk in Leicester. As it happens, it's almost 2 years to the date since I did that talk. And that talk changed my life quite, without putting too fine a point on it.
I think we all have kind of moments that changed everything.
Yeah.
And within a kind of general direction that you probably would have ended up here anyway. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, I think I would have, because, if you cut me in half, what you'd see in there is has researched women, violence and justice forever, has a finely developed sense of fair play and justice and equity. I pride myself, and I know this doesn't sound arrogant, but I pride myself in being a very ethical academic, right? I mean, I'm good at what I do. I don't mean that in a big head.
No, absolutely, and that all comes across. I mean, as I say, when the first time I heard you give that Women's Place UK lecture, and someone like Kathleen, but obviously in a different sphere, you come across as completely compassionate and not about binary slogans and sort of not about being hard line about anything, but really getting into the complexity. And then sort of, as you say, that after that lecture, everything changed. Can you say what happened next?
Yes, I can. So, and this was like an escalation, just like that. A senior manager that I work with asked me to see that individual, and the first thing they said was, "I'm not seeing you in my blank." For legal reasons, I have to make sure I don't actually name names and things like that. "I'm not seeing you in my blank role. This is in a personal role." I was told that what I had done by signing those letters and by speaking for WP UK was to fundamentally breach the trust of the people that I was working with, that the people I was working with were like a family. And my position was as the racist uncle sitting at the Christmas dinner table. And I'll be completely honest with you. I don't cry easily, but I cried at that point. I was deeply upset, more because I was frustrated, to be perfectly frank with you, because I kept wanting to say things like, "But hang on, we're academics. As academics, we have to be able to ask all questions and assess things from all points of view." And I was just getting blocked. And when I started crying and said that I was actually upset by what was being said to me, I was invited to call the counselling line for the university. So that happened, and then
and was there any kind of recognition from them that this was unusual, that this was not how they would normally approach you or approach a subject, and this
quite
were they right inside of it?
Yeah, quite the opposite. I mean, there had been an earlier moment that departmental relations and collegial relations were bruised, and that was in the immediate aftermath of the conference being cancelled. I threw my toys out the pram. I do, alongside the confidence that somebody just mentioned, I do a really good job of throwing my toys out of the pram when I feel that there's a point of principle. And so when the conference was cancelled, I quit the research group that I was part of on point of principle. And I wrote a letter to my dean and anyone else who would listen to me, saying that the cancellation of the conference presented real reputational risks for the university. And what I received coming back was a whole discussion about the reputational risks of hanging out with a well-known transphobe, i.e. Richard Garside. So I knew, do you know what I mean? I knew that I was crossing political battle lines, for lack of better words, when I did the WP UK. And then after that, that comment was made, we had a departmental meeting. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. The timeline on this is a little bit fuddled because things were happening so quickly. But around that time, I got asked by Essex University to come and give a talk. I was due to give a talk the previous year, but I ended up in hospital because of a stupid accident of my own. And so this was a re-invitation, if you like, from the previous year. And I was invited by the Centre of Criminology, the then director, Nigel South. And I said, sure, I'd love to. He said, we'd love to take you out for Christmas dinner, so let's make it in December. And I said, which one of my talks do you want, right? Do you want the one that I'm writing about at the moment on child sexual exploitation and discourses of that? Do you want the one on youth justice that I'm writing about? Or do you want me to give you the kind of first pass of this brand new research project that I'm working on? And that's about prison placement policy, in Canada particularly, because I've been working with some colleagues in Canada. And he said, oh no, that one. So we agreed the talk back in, it was like the September, October. So then the OU stuff happened. Then, some time goes by. And what I was due to do was the Essex talk on the 6th, I think it was, of December. But the events are probably well known. I'm very happy to talk about them. They've been written about rather a lot. But all we're going to say at this point is that the morning hours of that day were very, very fraught. I was trying to make the University of Essex tell me that I would be safe if I appeared on campus, and that anyone who was going to come to my talk would be able to do so unimpeded. And they couldn't issue me those assurances. And because they couldn't, they cancelled / postponed it until the department decided to blacklist me. And so on the day that I got told I got blacklisted, which was a week later, I was also in a departmental meeting at the Open University. And I announced to all of my colleagues that I had been cancelled, right? I mean, it's highly unusual in academia. I mean, less so nowadays, but highly unusual. I expected my colleagues to go, oh, no, how terrible. In fact, what there was just cavernous silence until the chair of that particular meeting turned around to one of my colleagues and asked how they were progressing with writing a grant proposal about trans rights in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. So the rest becomes history. The Essex, I spent 18 months out in the cold, not knowing what on earth was going to happen to my career because of Essex. Essex was used by detractors at my own university to prove that I was a transphobe. It became this kind of circular nightmare until, thank you, Maya Forstater, the Forstater ruling, right? Because when that came out, that's when myself and John Pike and Laura McGrath decided to really push the moment, not push the moment to its crisis, but we decided to form the Open University Gender Critical Network and launch it on Twitter with just one little tweet, just one tiny little tweet.
But the Reindorf review must have been going on while
I
was, so while my appeal was going on, because it came out quite quickly after my judgment, I think.
It came out just before.
Or just before my judgment, yeah.
Yeah, so the Reindorf, but it took 18 months for the Reindorf review to come out. So from what I understand, they had appointed somebody to do the review at Essex, but the LGBT staff, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll move back. Is that better?
Sounds okay to me.
Okay. Yeah, so it's also me fiddling about with things. I'm a terrible fidgeter. They had somebody appointed to do the original review, but that person wasn't approved by the LGBTQI staff network. I don't know why. I'm not privy to that. That's what I'm given to understand. And then, of course, Aqua Reindorf came in to do the review. She took months collecting evidence. She herself got ill, I think, at one point. I don't think it was COVID, but she was ill. And so it took a very, very long time for that review to come out.
What gave Essex the impetus or the courage to do it, which lasted about 5 minutes after they issued the apology and then evaporated? But they must have had some courage or something compelling them.
Do you want my personal opinion? This is my personal, and this is purely personal, and I hope people wouldn't quote me on it, but I'm happy to have it quoted. I knew Anthony Forster, the VC, and Lauren Fox-Amani, the DVC, from our days together at Durham University. So I know Anthony to be, a man actually concerned with process. Properly concerned with process. I think the university has got itself in a pickle. And I think that he and Lorna, they know me. They know my work, and I think it probably shocked them to the core what had happened. And then, of course, although I didn't know it at the time, what they did to Rosa Freeman would have also shocked them. And I know from working with Anthony of old that he will want the problems out in the open. So I think actually, he was like that because it is the only way to deal with a problem like that, is to bring it out into the open. Of course, what happened afterwards, is...
that was extraordinary. And, this whole thing has been like these kind of waves of sort of breakthrough and euphoria and, moments when you feel like the grown-ups are back in the room, or, somebody says something in a way that is how you would normally deal with difficult issues. And it's like, the sun breaks through the clouds, and then the next day it starts pissing it down with rain. The day J.K. Rowling published her essay, and I think we all thought, oh, okay, she's done it. And she's talking about people know you're a good person. How many people know that J.K. Rowling's a good person and who've had their careers made by her, and and yet still, when she made, as you said, you make the announcement that you've been cancelled, and everyone suddenly starts looking at their shoelaces.
But you must know this. It's very difficult unless somebody's had the experience of it. It's very difficult to describe that flip. Do you know what I mean? From, oh no, this is normal, we're just talking, and then suddenly, boom.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to leadership. In that meeting, if your head of department, or whoever was the top dog in that room, had said something else other than you know, how's the grant on trans rights going?
Yeah.
Everyone would have followed.
Yeah.
But because he didn't, nobody followed him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, I think that's what was happening with the Rheindorf review. And I have to tell you, during those 2 years or 18 months that I was waiting, I was sending so many emails to Essex saying, please, you've got to get this out, because, you know, my career has a cloud over it at the moment. And I, you know, being the sort of person I am, and believing in universities and professionalism, I was very prepared to trust the process. And not so prepared anymore, but, you know, at that point I really was. And so the Rheindorf review was published on the 18th of May, which is slightly before your ruling, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that's right. I think, I mean, I've been through, obviously, my tribunal and the appeal, but alongside that has been a whole nother process of complaints against me at the Scouts, and then my complaint against the Scouts for the way that they treated me. And I've trusted that process less and less. But I think, you know, this thing about using the processes, I think, is really important. And you know, the Václav Havel essay about the fruit and veg, about the signs, and the fruit and veg stalls who put up the signs saying trans women are women, or I don't think that's what they were saying in Czechoslovakia, but you know, and he says the thing that dissident movements do is use the processes and force the processes to show things, to show what's not working into the open. But it's really punishing on the individuals who are caught in those processes, and it takes years.
And I think, I mean, that's the thing, because, you know, I mean, thank you to you and a number of others, because, you know, I was just waiting around alone for the last few years, to be perfectly frank. And that's largely because I thought that I'd left any activism behind, because I was trying to be, for 23 years, a serious scholar who understood the difference between, you know, activism and the creation of knowledge, or at least understood where you were doing one or the other. And I preferred to do the creation of knowledge stuff, quite frankly. So I was kind of alone, and then I tweeted about the Rheindorf review, and it went crazy, didn't it? It went crazy. Never seen anything like that. That was an amazing moment, and I don't know what it felt like to people on the outside, but I just kept looking at my Twitter feed. You know, I was lucky. I had 200 followers at that point. You know, and I considered myself really lucky, and it just went.
Yeah.
You know, crazy. But going back to the less happy story. So Rheindorf comes out. That was elation. Rosa and I start working together, and we start getting the message out about how brave Essex University was to publish that. And we try giving them lots of praise, because, you know, if people like me punish them for doing the right thing, then it creates even more of a disincentive to do the right thing. So I tried to get a lot of promo material out there to say, you know, well done, Essex, well done, Essex. Boy, I feel foolish for doing that now, quite frankly. And then we launched the OU GCRN, and I see one of my colleagues is in the room at the moment. So hello. We launched the OU GCRN, and then a little bit like, you know, the batshit craziness after the Rheindorf review, it went crazy. And the level of targeted harassment against each and every one of us was something really quite to behold. There was at least 4 open letters at one point, one organized by some of my direct colleagues, one organized by the student union, one organized by the part of the university that hosted the website that our it's called a special interest group, but it's a research network, that our research network had a home in. That part of the university wrote an open letter. And then some of our neighboring research groups got together and decided that if the convener, the director of that research unit, wouldn't kick us out, then they'd all leave and write an open letter. And one by the LSE. Yeah. and one by the LSE, and one that I found out about today. Well, I think I knew about it at the time, but I was in such shell shock, I forgot. That is actually on a Wiley Publishing website, because it's the journal, an academic journal. Gender for Work and Organization has an open statement defaming us on a publisher's website. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
It's exhausting. There's a question here. I'm going to chuck it in because I think it fits here. It comes from somebody by email, I think, and she says, like so many others, like Rosa, Kathleen, Selena, you seem a really unlikely target for vilification. Why do you think such vitriol is reserved for those women who speak most reasonably and can present a rational argument supporting their positions? I mean, the answer is kind of in the question, but you may have some insights.
Yeah, there's nothing like a moderate, rational, tight argument to drive people crazy. I mean, quite frankly, and from my point of view, I was talking to an old friend literally earlier today who was on somebody else's Twitter feed, someone who runs another network that is an acronym for alcohol, who tweets often late at night.
Yes.
Yeah. And this older friend of mine was trying to ask me to explain their point of view. This is a very eminent academic, I have to say, who was asking me to do this. And the more I tried to explain, the more this eminent academic was saying, but Joe, that makes no sense. So why is it that we're getting targeted? Because we have the answers and we have the critique. And I think that it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. We're not shouting. We're just simply practicing our craft. And our craft is honing our minds, doing critique, making arguments. And a lot of our detractors, they're more, I'm going to say this, I don't think this is defamatory because there's no people I'm mentioning, but much what I hear coming across from the other side is very little more than propaganda. It's just the continual restatement of a position with nothing behind it.
And that thing that you described in the beginning of this kind of circle of condemnation, where at the heart of it is something so mild and so defensible, and yet people have kind of lined up in a circle to say, well, if Essex cancelled her, then she must be bad, and if so and so's writing a letter about her, then she must be bad. And
I mean, I think where I got into trouble, and where all of us have ultimately, where it all started, is we all had the temerity to criticize Stonewall. Do you know what I mean? In one way or another.
I think that's right. I mean, I've kind of thought about what it is that I did, what it is that I said, because obviously I've gone through all of my tweets and everything that I wrote, and my employer has never said to me, this is the thing that you did. And I think the thing that I did was not apologizing, because it's not about the thing that you did, it's about your action after the thing you did. If whatever reasonable thing you said caused people to attack you, if you then capitulate and apologize and abase yourself and say, I'll do better and I'll educate myself, and then you survive. But if you don't apologize, then you have to be destroyed. That's what I've come to think it was. And I've seen so many other people go through that. So all of the stuff about misgendering, or you've caused harm, or it's that you won't apologize for saying that there is corruption and abuse. And Stonewall is is at the sort of apex of that system, I think, but there are a lot of other players as well.
I mean, I was asked to apologize to my main harasser twice. Right. And my main harasser is not at the same. I'm a very senior academic, not just because I'm old, but because I've done a lot and I've collected pretty much every glittering prize there is to collect. which has been, I've had a wonderful career. Let's put it that way. But one of my main harassers is not so far along, and it has been suggested to me, and indeed just yesterday on Twitter, I believe, it has been suggested to me that I am abusing my position as a senior prof. So I refuse to apologize.
Yeah, and then there's the other thing that, well, if you're still standing, if you're still alive, if you're still able to open your mouth, then you've not been cancelled, and nothing bad has been done to you.
Maya, how do you cope? I mean, I know this is, we're supposed to be talking all of it, but how do you cope with that? Seriously, it drives me crazy.
I don't know. I mean, I think mine was much quicker in terms of, losing. Although it took 6 months for me to lose my job, and that was the worst part, because I was on my own and I didn't know what was happening, and I was kind of trusting the process within my employer. Although the process was very, there wasn't much of a process, but I was trusting that good people who I trusted to be rational, and who I honestly don't, I don't think any of them believe any of this. I had sort of thought it would be all right. So that 6 months was the most painful part. But then once I'd lost my job, and then launched the crowdfunder and sort of, come out on the other side of the mirror or whatever, it was just it was a completely different place. And I've lost trust in so many institutions and so many people, but I haven't had to try and hold on to that trust. Whereas I think if you're in an organization trying to hold on to it, trying to keep it going, it must be so much harder. And, I look at Kathleen Stock, for example. I mean, if someone's inside an institution and inside a career, they can be tortured.
I mean, because one of the harassing events that happened was an open letter that was on Google Docs. It was about every member of the OUGCRN, but the evidence was the podcast that I did with Julian Vigo, and I had misrepresented parts of that podcast to make it out that, I was hideous and horrible. Now, that was a staff-only letter. And the last time I saw that, it had 380 signatures on it from across the university. It was that open letter that tipped me completely over mental health wise, and I don't mind admitting it. I was off my box for pretty much most of June. I was also recovering from my mother dying and from having my spine fused. So it was a horrible collision of terrible events. Yeah, that tipped me over the edge. And the reason why, this is why my heart broke for Kathleen last week. I mean, proper broke for Kathleen last week. When you realize that these scurrilous and pernicious stereotypes have been spread to every corner of your working life, you suddenly come to the realization that there is no going back to any place of innocence ever again. And that there is no place of, I hate using the word safety because it's so misused at the moment in universities, but there is no place that is free from the weight of all of this in your career. And I think that's the real heartache. That one's the difficult one. I mean, you're more like my namesake, Maya. You have risen from the ashes and you are in full flight, and it's wonderful to see that. I like to say that I'm rising from the ashes, but I've still got 10 more years in universities to go. And me, Kathleen, where the hell can we go where these people aren't going to be attacking us all over again?
Yeah. And to turn this around, we can't all be outside of these systems. We have to be inside these systems. We have to be inside these organizations. We have to be inside careers. And that's,
I mean, there's nothing I could do. I am an academic through and through. I'm not fit for the real world. They made institutions called universities for people like me. So I need to be in them. And I think the real, the thing for Kathleen, I think they have so ramped up what they meaning the protesters have so ramped up their protests that I don't know, even if I was the VC of Sussex, I don't know what I would do or how I could protect Kathleen. You know, I'd be talking to my lawyers about a massive payout, because, you know, how else does somebody at the top of an organization square that? Unless they call in the police and say, we're not going to have this paramilitaristic protesters shooting off flares on my private property. You know, I don't know why he hasn't done that.
Yeah, but like you say, I mean, this has been going on for at least 2 years at Sussex, you know, at least 2 years at the Open University. And, you know, if it seems like if they had said no early on, you know, without letting it escalate to where it's got, they could have said no. But now it's quite difficult. It's like, you know, how do you get there? Well, I wouldn't start from here if I were you.
No, but can I do a little plug here for the Crowd Justice Funder?
Yes.
Because, you know, one of the reasons, you know, I'm doing this, I'm taking the OU to the tribunal for all sorts of reasons, some of them deeply private and personal, but mostly because we need our universities to have the resources to be able to say, no, that's harassment. That is not protest, that's harassment. And, you know, it is my undying belief, and I hope the tribunal will show this, that vexatious claims of transphobia without any evidence are harassment, full stop. They are not protected speech. And so I think that if we can get a ruling to that effect, then that then gives university managers the ability to nip all of this shit, all of this stuff in the bud.
And that's what they need to do. I mean, if they let it go, if they give it credence early on, it you know, it's like, don't let the zombies in.
And there is a problem in universities, though, and I know that, you know, we want to be able to talk about next things. There is one really big problem, to my knowledge, and you know, we need a lawyer here. If only we had a lawyer. But to my knowledge, there is nobody, or no university has the processes or procedures in place for academics to be able to take students through a procedure for harassment. Students can take academics, but not the other way around. So I think there's something in law that's strange about the clientage relationship between academics and students. That has to be sorted out.
And is that, I mean, you know, I guess in the same way, you can't take your customer to, you know, to court for harassment, but you can say, I don't want you as a customer.
Yeah.
You know, and the university is the intermediary between the, you know, the talent, you guys, and the customers.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if the universities knew that they'd be failing on their duty of care to their academics if they didn't step up disciplinary procedures or whatever against students, then that would be great. But at the moment, you know, it's just open warfare on academics, because no university manager, I mean, look at what happened at the University of Essex, for goodness sake. You know, no university manager is going to take on, you know, the kind of the more extreme end of the lobbyists at the moment. It just whips up too much discord and foment and conflict, and it's much easier to kind of throw your 2 or 3 academics, you know, under the bus than the 400, 800, 1,000 students who are complaining. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't do that. I was going to say I'd do that, but no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that. You know,
and what do you think the balance is? I mean, you know, so there have been open letters before on both sides, and there are, you know, there've been a couple more over the last couple of weeks. There was the legal academics letter, and then there was the one that Sex Matters coordinated to the EHRC, and we were seeing, you know, names on there that we hadn't seen on previous letters. You know, and so there are, you know, there are the people who sign the letters condemning you, and there are the slightly growing group of the people signing the sort of be brave letters.
Mm.
And then there's a whole lot of people in the middle.
Going like that.
Are they, you know, sitting inside the university, how does it, you know, how does that look like to you? What does that middle look like to you?
I oscillate. I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. I oscillate. For the most part, I think I can think directly of a few colleagues who think it's a marginal interest. Do you know what I mean? They don't recognize that this is the world that they are living in, and it's going to impact them. It's not like, you know, that first they came for me and then they're going to go for them. It's about the degradation of academic culture and the degradation of academic freedom. And you know, this is what I keep saying, and that I am a professional academic first and foremost. That is my you know, kind of allegiance here is, you know, both my politics but my professionalism. And academic freedom is not visible. Full stop. End of sentence. You know, you cannot club the knowledge base of a country or a university according to politics. You know, I mean, it was the Catholic Church of Galileo many years ago, and now it's, you know, sex.
It's just amazing.
You just can't do it. And I think that there are a lot of academics out there who actually don't realize what's at stake here. They think it's just, you know, the gender wars, a culture war over there. They don't realize that this is much more fundamental. So I think there's that. But then there are a whole swathe of academics who are genuinely afraid. Genuinely afraid. You know, I've had at least 10 emails from very senior academics in the last 48 hours since we launched the Crowd Justice Fund, saying, I didn't have a lot to give this month, I'll give more. I couldn't put my name down. I'm too afraid.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Yeah. So that's how it looks. From my point of view, I see I hear the distant thunder rolls. It feels like it's coming to a head. Do you know what I mean? If this is a battle, it feels like it's coming to a head. I was so delighted to see Karen McAvoy and Tim Newburn's name on that letter that you organized. I can't to the EHRC. I can't tell you how delighted I was. Karen McAvoy and Tim Newburn, they are very senior scholars. They've held very senior posts. So to see those sorts of names coming out, I've been contacted on Twitter by a few other fairly serious male. It's always male.
I was going to say, and men. I mean,
yeah,
when men see this, senior men, I think that makes a difference.
It does, but you know, I feel really ambivalent when we say that, because it's like, what, you know, I only get people to sit up and pay attention to what's happening to me when a man talks about it. You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's an irony, but you know, in these sorts of wars, I'll take all the support I can get.
Yeah.
You know, but you can see the kind of forces gathering and playing out on the battlefield, and you can see where the lines are beginning to develop. And I see a lot of people who are going to be forced to pick a side at some point. And it's going to be really, really nasty in universities. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, frankly.
And do you think that Kathleen Stock, it feels like Kathleen Stock, what they've done to Kathleen Stock has been awful, but it feels like that has opened more eyes and made more people think, you know, yeah, I need to take a stand on this.
Yeah, I think it was, you know, I'm not speaking lightly, because if I was Kathleen Stock, I don't know. I don't know how she's coping at the moment, you know, and all I can send is big love to her. But I think it's a pivot point, to be perfectly frank, because I think, you know, to use the language of Twitter, I think that peaked half of England, if not half of the UK, because it was so over the top, and because it is militaristic, you know. So I think there is a turning point, and I think it's going to feel like we're moving forward, but and I think that's great. But I think that's like the general groundswell behind But as it reaches the battleground, if you follow what I mean, if you can play with the metaphor a little bit more, as it reaches the battleground, then that's going to get really bloody right there. And it's going to be lawfare. This is going to be fought out through the courts of law. So I think we've got, another 18 months, maybe 2 years, because there's quite a few cases now, aren't there?
Yeah, there are cases coming up that haven't been announced, and I think there will be more. I mean, there are lots of people going through disciplinaries and being harassed at work and trying to get through it, and who won't end up in court. But I think there will be more people in court, and I think somebody will need to sue their trade union. That there will need to be more cases in different sectors. And there's the lawfare, but there's also the sort of war of attrition on people's mental health and people's reputation, which is is getting, even as you say, even as we're kind of winning and it's in the open, and when the arguments are in the open, we're winning, the viciousness of this on the people who are most exposed becomes so much stronger. And I was thinking about the conference, we were both at Filia over the weekend, and there were people outside drawing great big penises on the ground, and we talk about harassment, and people are trying to find what is that awful thing that I said that harassed somebody who doesn't exist. This sort of idea that we are the harassers, and yet people can draw obscene fuck turfs and obscene things on the ground on a place where a vigil was going to be held, and that they are the good guys, and that is Amnesty International. It's
mind-blowing. Is what it is, and I think it's one of the things that, I mean, I've struggled with it for 2 years, because I've had all sorts of ever since Essex, really. I got told that I made people feel unsafe. To all of you people out there in viewer land or in listener land, I'm 5'2", right? I'm disabled.
There is a thing, I think, about turfs being small, if I can use that language in a
we are small, but we are mighty.
Small. There are a lot of small women in this. There are some big women and some amazing big women, but I mean, you meet some people who have stood up to this and just think, physically.
How do I make people feel unsafe?
Yes, exactly.
But and the other thing that I say to that too, when I hear that from colleagues I've had a number of colleagues over the last couple of years who have tried to be interlocutor, kind of an intermediary between me and the other side, and they'll say, "Oh, but Joe, you make them feel unsafe. You make them feel unsafe," and they find those ideas really toxic and offensive, right? And my answer is always the same. Well, I find the idea of capitalism and inequality and violence against women offensive and very disturbing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm sorry, I feel very unsafe I feel unsafe, so it means I need to do something. Do you know what I mean? That needs to inform my politics. That's one of my little bête noirs, is that whole kind of unsafe and making people feel unsafe.
So I've gone back to the questions, and I want to kind of jump back into the real world for a minute, the academic world. And your story links the real world policy questions around prisons and the craziness in academia. So Maggie Mellon from Evidence-Based Social Work asked, what would you say are the chief harms of placing men in women's prisons?
That's very, very, very easy. So most people they may or may not know the constituency of people who are in female prisons. Female prisoners are not terribly dangerous people. In fact, they're some of the most vulnerable people in the world. I hate that, but I can't qualify it. Somewhere between the estimations run between 80 and 90% of the women who are serving short-term prison sentences in Britain's female prisons have histories of violence, domestic violence, rape, battery, child sexual abuse, child sexual exploitation. So the most extreme versions of violence against women, if you like. In addition to that, They are people usually with profound mental health problems, often drug and alcohol problems. So we're dealing with a very well-known constituency of individuals. Now, to put a male-bodied individual, I'm going to distinguish between all sorts of different categories of trans here. To put a male-bodied individual who identifies as a woman into a female prison, whether or not they have histories of sexual offenses doesn't matter. The mere presence of that male body will make some of the women feel very unsafe. And that is because these are women whose lives have been punctuated by male violence. And female prisons, there's a paradox about imprisoning women in female prisons. Even though you've got male prison officers in there, women often talk about feeling the relief and of not having the burden of male violence in them. So there's that issue. However, when we start talking about self-identification policies, with or without a GRC, but just self-identification, we know that there are, this is thanks to Nick Williams from Fair Play for Women, we know that a significant percentage of our trans women identifying men who are currently in the male estate have one or more sexual offenses in their histories. And so to put them in a female prison, I mean, honestly, you're talking about putting a fox in the hen house, and forgive the grossness of that metaphor, but that's what it is. Now, there's also another constituency, and we could talk about people who have had all sorts of body modifications, had all the surgeries, do all the hormone treatment, and maybe they've been trans women with a GRC for 20 or 30 years. Well, there's no real issues there. And quite a few women I've talked to who are or have been in prison have said, you know, there's always been a very small constituency of trans women that are just like them. Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, so we've got that, but then we've got sexual predators who will abuse whatever system there is to be able to get into women's prison. They may or may not be be trans, but they are sexual predators. And then, of course, we've got, you know, this kind of more contemporary version of trans identities, which are more about staying in a permanent state of transition, a kind of a middle state, not one state to the other, but rather this permanent place of bracketing off any binary, if you like. All of the problems here aren't about those people, but they're about the needs and vulnerabilities of the women with whom they're placed. So that's it in a nutshell. But if you want to hear more, I would really encourage you to come to the Women's Place UK talk on the 27th of October, called A Woman's Place is Not in Prison.
Good advertisement.
Well, you know, I like to sing for my supper.
So just, you know, you make those differentiations between different kinds of trans women, and that sort of goes to this idea of individualized case-by-case assessment. Do you think that's possible? Or, I mean, my view is that institutions need to be able to serve groups of people, and the group of people that is men who identify as women, whatever surgery they've had, is a group which doesn't overlap with the group that is women, however close they get, and that institutions and rules need to be able to serve groups. Do you think, I mean,
what's my views?
Get solved?
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to come at it from a different way. One of the things I haven't talked about much in the public domain is that other area of research that I am very well known for, and that's a critical take on risk assessment and needs assessment analyses in criminal justice contexts, particularly in the context of youth justice. Right, that's I've built up a whole career on that sort of stuff. So the current way that we have of dealing with a risk and need assessment on a case-by-case basis is hopeless. Right? I mean, it should not be. It is much easier to create those group policies than the individual risk assessment. The individual risk assessment is normally based on almost like a composite right? So most women offenders have these risk factors, these risk categories. Most male offenders have these, and these. And of course, a trans individual sits in between both of those risk assessments. And those risk assessments take an epidemiological approach. And an epidemiological approach within this context of criminal justice actually doesn't work, regardless of what people think. You can't predict, well, you can. I'm going to say one sentence and then contradict myself. You cannot predict people's offending, with one exception. The single greatest predictor of offending is sex. You know, 80, and that's been the way through history. You know, most of it is 85 to 15 ratio. Women basically don't commit crime, men do.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I was looking at the response. You know, we did this petition. Claire Dominion launched a petition to ask the government to record sex accurately for violent criminals, and the answer that came back was completely incoherent, and you know, but basically said no, we'll record gender, some places will record legal sex, nowhere will we record biological sex, but we will do risk assessment. And you know, how can you do risk assessment if you cannot write down what someone's sex is?
No, so you don't know which, because I mean, you know, at the most basic, risk assessment tools are divided male, female, adult, children.
Right.
Like, that's it. You know, so which shelf do you go to?
Yeah.
But also, this flies in the face of knowledge. I'm sorry, it's just such an anti-knowledge approach, because you know we have 200 years of criminological analysis about violence, about patterns of offending. We know an awful lot that doesn't necessarily need to be put into a risk assessment. There is another question to ask here, though, Maya. There's another way to solve this problem, and that's stop the over-reliance on prisons. Do you know what I mean? It's like we often go straight to where should we put these people? It's like, well, if we get rid of most prisons for most people, and actually only incarcerate the very seriously dangerous. You know, because most women who are in prison serve sentences of less than 6 months. This means that they are tried in the magistrate's court, which means they are tried for petty property offences on the whole. Those people don't need to be in prison.
Yeah, so we wouldn't start here.
yeah. Where would you start? Not here.
Yeah. So I want to ask you another question that's coming. This is from Natasha. It's a question for you, but also for me, which is, if you knew what you know now, that you know the good people, the people you trusted to be rational, would turn out not to be, or at least not to be brave, would you have still spoken up?
Yeah, this is the hill I was always going to die on. If there was ever going to be a hill that I'd die on, it would be this, because it's like I said, you know, it's about feminist politics, it's about women standing up, it's about voices, it's about ethics, it's about professionalism, and it's about academic freedom, and all of that feeds into democracy. I know those are all big words, but
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, it's about truth, it's about biology, and ultimately, you know, that's what we are. We're evolved apes, and if we can't know ourselves and talk about ourselves, then you know, how can we know anything else?
Yeah. And you know, I mean, for me, and now if the question was slightly different, I might answer it differently. So if the question was, what would you have changed about the last few years? I would have said, I would have got to know you, Maya. I would have got to know Selena, Kathleen, Julie, all this amazing, you know, army of people around me. I would have got to know them quicker, and I would have had them in place before I opened my mouth. I wouldn't have started here.
Well, but you know, that's impossible. And if you hadn't done it, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have got to know each other. And that, that for me has been the best thing. I found the best people. That this topic really does filter for integrity and bravery. So I want to do a final bit of advertisement for your where have you got to on your crowdfunder?
Oh, I don't know. Will you talk while I just
I'll
refresh?
talk while you. So Jo Phoenix's crowdfunder is at bit.ly/Prof Phoenix, and she is aiming to raise 80k, I think, at least 50 and hopefully 80 to get to be somewhere comfortable with the case. Where have you got to?
We are at 56,416. That is in 48, that is in less than 56 hours. So it's not 3 days yet. My private goal and ambition, I'll tell you why, is to get to 80,000 by the end of the week. One of the ways that universities deal with people like me is to sweat us out and allow the clock to tick up and the legal expenses to tick up. The Open University have a very big law firm that they've contracted, and this law firm has a terrible reputation. And so I think the only way they can see that I am absolutely serious is by hearing the voices of everybody who has contributed so far. I mean, we have 2,246 contributors, and most of them are, around, average spend is £24, right? So these are people who can ill afford, probably, to contribute, and yet they are. So I think that's a real show of strength, and if we can, break the records.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at Filia. I read the comments. And it makes me cry, and I hope the other side are reading the comments in all of these cases and understanding what they're up against.
I hope so too.
Well, good luck, Jo. Thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody who's joined us, and I hope you'll come back next month. We're going to be talking to Dr. Jagbir Jati Jahal from the University of Birmingham, who she's also an academic, but her particular area is about the Sikh community, and she's talked about the particular importance of single-sex services, everyday single-sex services for Sikh women and girls. And I think that is an aspect of this that has been ignored by the authorities for far too long. So I'm really excited about her coming on. Thank you, Jo, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else who's joined us tonight and for supporting Sex Matters. We will win this.
Yay. Cheerio.
Bye.